hello, and welcome to Painted Bread Quarterly Slush Pile. We're so glad that you've made the choice to listen in. What you're about to listen to is an editorial meeting among many staff members of the Painted Bread Quarterly. So we're going to go around and say hello to everybody and just make sure that you know we get submissions. We decide if maybe they would be good for an episode. We contact the poet and ask their permission to discuss them on the show. And thank gosh, poets are brave in so many ways because they often say, "Oh my God, how scary." Yes. Right? And we all know you're only brave if you're afraid and you still say yes. If you're not afraid, that doesn't make you brave. That just makes you unafraid. So, we'd like to thank, that's what my pappy always told me. We'd like to thank Jin Cordaro for being brave and a wonderful poet. We'll be discussing her in a minute. We have a nice full house of staff here today. Since I have the mic right now, I'll keep going. I'm Kathleen Volk Miller, and I'm proud to say I've been with Painted Bread Quarterly for so very long. Marion, I just realized this second.
But
we've been PBQ's 50, 51-ish.
Yep.
She lies about her age a little bit, I think. She hems and haws. But regardless of that, we have crossed over into being with PBQ longer than she was without us.
Oh, look at that.
Yeah, I suck so hard at math that it took me about 5 years to realize. That's pretty cool.
Well, I joined right when the 25th anniversary was coming out.
Yes, and I feel like I actually use that as a marker as well. So I was only on, for like a year before you, maybe.
Right.
I felt like that 25th anniversary was one of the first things I was truly involved with. So
Yeah.
So pretty cool, right?
Very cool. And how old is Haley now? Haley's got to be what, 30?
30. Yeah.
There it is. She's my mark.
There it is.
She is my.
Yep. So, all right. You know what? I gave the mic to Marion. So Marion, you take it.
Greetings. Greetings, Earthlings, from North Carolina, where I'm hanging out with Mother Wrenn and enjoying the great state of North Carolina and its beautiful weather. And that puts me very close to Lisa.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm so glad you're here and not in Abu Dhabi, so you can enjoy the soupy summer weather with me. I'm in Charlotte, and I just heard the cicadas for the first time today, so
nice.
That's the marker. And I will send it to Sam.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Lisa. I'm here in DC, though I'll be leaving for Taiwan for the rest of the summer later this week. So this is a kind of a special week for me. And I'm just so happy to be here at the start of summer. I'm going to pass it to one of our guests today, Holly.
Hi, thank you. I am excited to be here. I'm coming to you from Brooklyn. But next week I am going to go join Marion and Lisa down in North Carolina. Yeah.
Okay.
Big long drive from Brooklyn all the way through North Carolina. So
I'll swing by, pick up Kathy and Sam, and we'll all have.
Yeah. Did you notice that we went south and we came back up?
So thanks for having me, and I'm going to throw it over to Vivian.
Hi, I'm Vivian, and I am a current co-op at Video Collaboration. Yeah, and I just got a message from Heath, like she is graduating. Congratulations.
Woo!
And, so like me and Jess, actually I'm taking over for the most part, and like if I need help, Jess is going to come in and help with the like the slush pile. Yeah, it's nice meeting you all, and I am in PA.
Welcome.
Great. All right. Well then, Jess, she said your name, so I tag you as next.
All right. Hey, I'm Jess. I'm also a current co-op at Drexel's Video and Collaboration and Production program. So yeah, I'm also in Philly. I'm a Drexel student. I'm a game design and production student. Heath was also a game design and production student, so that's really cool. And yeah, I'm super excited to be here. Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you for being here. We appreciate it. And now we did save Heath for last, as Heath is leaving us after working as a co-op and helping with our website as well as this show. And we're sorry to see you go, but so happy and proud for you.
Happy and proud, Heath. Rock on.
Thanks,
Watch out, Rose.
guys. I'm very excited for this all. I'm a little sad this is my last time being here to record, but it's been great and I'm super excited to go on.
Yeah.
Good. That's exactly how you should feel. That's wonderful. Okay, so I sometimes picture the poet, out there and listening to these shows beforehand, probably, to get a sense of what we're about, right? This is my imagination does a whole narrative here that we ask them. And if they haven't ever listened, they're like, oh, I better listen to that. And then they listen to it and they're like, yeah, okay, this is groovy. All right, I'll do it. And then when it's actually the episode in which we're discussing their work, they're probably sitting there going, oh my God, would you please get to my poems? Right? I think I would. So enough chatting. We're here to talk about Jin Cordaro's work. We have some poems, and the first one up is Flavor in the Hands. And without any warning at all, but Holly, because you are a guest, I'm wondering if you would like to kick us off and read?
Sure.
It's the best way. This way you didn't have to be nervous before.
Thank you so much. Okay, so
Oh, I've heard you read at meetings. You know how to read a poem. Let's do it.
flavors in the hands. They know a ripe avocado is not like the firm baseball of a closed heart or a brother's finger pressing into the flesh of your arm, soft as a hand holding your hand, or just the right spot to break the asparagus spear, where structured meets mutable. They know to keep kneading the dough if it stretches and tears like the bending of rules. Know when to be bold and when to stop before it's tough and tight. They can find a way with what's on hand. Garlic semi-sticky on the fingers. Crush it open instead with the handle of your knife. Where to hold it so that it floats, balanced, finishing quick but even. Flat knuckles of one hand as a guide. This extension, the skin to an organ that reminds us of finely minced advice told through scarred loops and whorls. The mouth depends on the hands, while the eyes tell you only what they want to see. As for the nose, its flair for nostalgia gets in the way, and the ears too passive to create. But the hands shape and mend. They are the makers. They guide you through the dark.
Great reading.
Told ya.
Dang, Holly Messitt. Dang, okay.
Thank you.
And dang Jin Cordaro, right?
And I did make one mistake in there. There was one line where I made a mistake, and it was, which line was it? I forgot which line it was, but I did make a mistake in one line, but I kept going.
Wow, I didn't catch it. Did you catch it, anybody? All right, Slushies, that's a great opportunity to tell you that you can also go to the website, pbqmag.org, and read along, press pause, go there, whatever you need to do. But the poems are up there for your viewing pleasure as well.
So just as the reader, I want to say these line breaks are so beautiful and natural. Like, I really feel the poet's voice coming through these line breaks. They're masterful, really. The reading was smooth because the line breaks are so smooth.
And listen, I'm so glad you said that, because that was a question I had about this poem, right? So for instance, right, you read so beautifully something that tripped my eye, right? So they know a ripe avocado is not like line break, the firm baseball of a closed heart, comma, or. And for me, I want the or on that third line, but the way you read that it really revealed the genius of that line break, right? The way Jin sort of suspends you at the end of the line, right? because that or I think is actually the logic of the whole poem, right? Like the way the description of they are this, they are this, they are this. And it's only about like, you know, 2/3 of the way through that I catch on that they are actually the hands, right? And that it's a poem that's celebrating the work of hands, not hands as metaphor, right? So like it's all in that or, which is
Thank
thank
you.
you for teaching me that. Thank you for teaching me that.
And I think it is, that was one of the things that on the page, I kept tripping me up, like they, who's they?
Yeah.
And then, yeah, it's the hands, it's the flavor that's in the hands, and what a beautiful way of being in the world, of knowing the world somatically through their hands.
Yes. Which again, like what the poet is doing is like straightforward. It's in the title. Flavor is in the hands, right? And so I'm thinking that somehow like flavors in the hands of someone who is a chef, right? Like it's in the hands, like there's an implied of something, and there's not. It's in the hands, which just is a lovely way of feeling like the poem tells me to just slow down and take in this description, right? So interesting.
I love the focus on like this of the senses too, because I think that sometimes I almost only see touch as a sense in romantic poems, you know, or it's sort of like a forgotten sense, I think sometimes. And I also think that I just love how what you said, Marion. Like I thought, oh yeah, this is going to be like a poem about someone who like with some kind of professional need or expert need works with their hands. So it was like a pleasant surprise that actually, you know, maybe many of us are kind of having these experiences all the time. And it's sort of like knowledge in touch, which is something I really like as well. I just think it's a gorgeous poem.
All right, and full disclosure, Slushies and everyone, as we were talking in advance of this podcast, I came to this discussion today having read the wrong batch of poems. So Jen, I am like a brand new, fresh reader to this poem, and again, like having that sort of like seesawing moment of like, huh, are these line breaks gonna work, right? And now, like having heard it out loud, seeing it on the page, the sort of like double whammy experience of the poem is has me really charmed, right? And so thank you.
I think this is a perfect poem for a Philly publication too, because we have the Please Touch Museum. We should send them a copy.
I love this for its subject matter too. Those of you who know me know that I do love to cook, but I think that I love that there's an homage to hands. And you know, I don't know if I've seen that or if I have not a lot of it. And to just, you know, yeah, validate an ode to the hands is just lovely. And it's so true how you can just trust, you know, it's actually even about dough. My father, when my mother passed away, my father made everybody a cookbook of my mother's recipes, and he transcribed her notes. And on this dough, for this bread that we had only twice a year, Christmas and Easter, one of her directions is add flour till it looks right.
Yeah.
And the first time I had to make it on my own, I literally looked up at the ceiling and went, till it looks right, Mom. And I heard her say, don't play stupid. You know what I mean. It was so what she would say. And I did just trust my hands and my history and made the bread, right? So I love that idea that you just trust your hands to know where to break the asparagus spear.
Yeah.
You know?
That's true. There's like this embodied knowledge, right? That you can only gain through experience. you can have the recipe, but that doesn't tell you how it feels. And I think I think you're right, Marion, that it is a straightforward ode to the hands and what they're capable of. But I feel like there might be an undercurrent of metaphor for something else. I'm not quite sure what that is, but I feel that energy a little bit.
Yeah, I would love to hear more about that too, right, Lisa? Like that, it's a significant, like it's a fairly lengthy poem, right? And if it's doing that descriptive work of the strength and the power and knowledge through the hands, what is there an like an analogy also, right? Like, is there, the metaphor underneath of it, right? But
Can I throw in there one moment that throws me, and it continues to throw me, and that's when the brother's hand is pressing into the flesh, because everything else is food, or an analogy to eyes, mouth, nose. But at one point, there's the brother's hands that are pressing into the arm, and what happens in the poem right there is that. It's the or. There's that or that hangs out in that second line as the end. A brother's fingers pressing into the flesh of your arm. Period. Line break. Soft as a hand holding your hand. Period. So at first it feels like this kind of violent image of the brother pressing, but then it's soft as a hand holding your hand. So it's a moment in the poem that seems to me, it's in the the first stanza, and it ends the first stanza. And second, it's the only time that any other being comes into the poem. I don't have an answer for it, but as we puzzle this out, I think that's a moment for us to look at.
And I'm struck by the way that juxtaposition, right, is in opposition, right? It's how do I say this? There's a accumulation in the poem, but it's also an accumulation in through juxtaposition rather than repetition, if that makes sense, right? And it's on that or, right? So even the start of the second stanza, the first word is or, right? So you've got back to that first stanza, it's like, they know a ripe avocado is not a baseball of a closed heart, right? Or a brother's fingers, right? And then an implied or, right? To me, soft as a hand holding your hand, right? So I think the thing that it really pulls me in, like makes this listing propulsive, right? Is that it's or, not just and, even though it feels like the engine's and, but it's like distinction, repetition, distinction, that feels like the sharpening of the idea.
And I don't know if I'm reading too much into it, but there does seem to be an intimation of violence. In this poem, like the second stanza, or just the right spot to break. Is the first line break, where the dough stretches and tears, when to be bold and when to stop. I don't know, and I don't know if I'm reading into it or if it is in the poem, but it seems like there are hints of violence throughout.
And you missed one in that second stanza also, and that is the asparagus spear.
Yes, true. Yes.
Right. And you know what, on that point, Lisa, the bending of the rules, right? They know the hands know to keep kneading the dough if it stretches and tears, like bending the rules. And this reminds me of Kathy's story about how her mom knew she would know what the right answer is because she's already embodied that knowledge, right? In some way, but it's the bending of rules, right? So there's something about violence, disobedience, knowledge in every which way, right? Yeah.
As we're talking about this, I just want to take a look at the last stanza. I know I'm jumping all the way down, but the hands shape and mend. They are the makers. They guide you through the dark.
Yeah.
So we end the poem on this sense of like mending, shaping, molding, guiding. So there is some, there is some sense of having moved through whatever violence starts up in the first stanza and moves through the stanzas, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, it reminds me of that expression, like the opposite of war is not peace, it's creation, right? And
Oh, that's
I
great.
like that with the idea of makers. I think it touches on that same thought.
I was just listening, right after the semester ended, I went to Maine, and there was a story being told, and the idea is, do you reach for the spear? Do you reach for the harp?
Right.
Or you know, so sometimes the harp does the work that the spear cannot do.
Yeah. And that last stanza starting with but, right? Like it's commenting directly on the stanza before, that's sort of itemizing the different senses, but it's also doubling down and commenting on the whole poem as well, right? This, sort of assessment of, that the opposite of war is creation, right? That's great.
I keep returning to the line in the fourth stanza, the end of the fourth stanza, about the finely minced advice told through scarred loops and whorls, which I take to be fingerprints. So I just, after all that discussion of the knife and how a knife is handled and how you can make sure you don't slip, and accidentally cut yourself, obviously, there has been this cutting and violence with the scarring, right? So I think that's an interesting juxtaposition there too. Which also, if we come back to the end, as far as like the mending, that's a place where things have been mended.
And Lisa, that the skin too is an organ, right? Reminds me too, it's also, someone said this much earlier, it's a way of knowing, right? That sort of embodied somatic touch as a form of knowledge that's often dismissed as legitimate for some reason in the hierarchy of the senses, right? And I just want to take this moment too to remind folks that we did a touch issue, right, years ago for PVQ, and this was sprung from grief out of the pandemic, right? The way the pandemic was damaging our sense of touch and proximity. So I think this poem speaks to me at that level too. Can't hear you, Kath.
Yeah, I hate to do this because I feel like we could go on, but we do have 2 more poems from Jen. So I'm wondering if we feel comfortable voting.
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Okay, so this is just like a meeting, and we're gonna, what do you call this? Rock our fists back and forth, and then shoot a thumb. All right, 1, 2, 3, shoot. And it's in. Woohoo! All right, thank you, Jen. And so right, I guess I mentioned now too, I'm glad we're 5 people today because that's an odd number. And we have a democratic editorial policy, which is really the whole reason why we decided to do this show, to allow people to bear witness to how much time and care we take with each poem, as well as the democratic editorial policy that we inherited and are proud to continue. Samantha, are you going to still work with, be on some shows while you're in Taiwan?
Not during the summer, no.
No? Then would you want to read the next one?
Sure, I can do that.
Okay.
Okay. That time you stole someone's shopping cart with their shopping list in the seat and a flower doodled in the corner, a sign, not a curse or a prayer, a devotion, a singular language to nourish and be nourished, Familiar words combined in a cipher, you can only translate every third word. Paprika, followed by shallots, means to put effort or caring. Cranberries combined with pecans and buttersquash means to sustain, keep well. What would this taste like? This list, a thin, opaque crepe filled with the soft, oozing breath of someone's attention and time. You slip it into your jacket, keep your hand on your pocket as you walk the store, rush home to unfold it. Imagine it's still warm, slightly browned on a skillet, sweet and bready with love. You chew it slowly, the only piece of food to be found.
Wow.
Yeah.
Great reading, Sam. And what a funky poem. What a funky
Yeah.
poem.
I love the title.
Mhm. Marion, what's the funky? What's funky
For
you?
me, so for me, it's like that. First of all, I love the theft, right? Like stealing someone's shopping cart and realizing that there's the list in it and you still steal it. That's a great premise, right? But then what would this taste like? And then this list, a thin opaque crepe, right? So this and that third stanza futzes with me, right? Because I'm like, is she talking about like cooking the list or cooking the items on the list? You know what I mean? Like, which is, I think, really kind of playful, right? That sense of like cooking the recipe, but so much of this list and slipping it in your pocket, right? Imagine it's still warm, the list, then slightly browned on a skillet. So is it me or is she eating the
Oh,
list?
I think she's eating the list.
She's eating the list. This is what I mean by
Yeah.
funky. This is what I mean by funky
Yeah.
because I thought it was
Okay.
mystery.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
And Slushies, what you can't see is that the women on this call are all nodding. They're like, yeah, she's eating the list.
Yeah,
Oh,
which
man.
I'm all the way back with Sam on that title. Like everybody, I'll bet, has had that happen to them or like that. Either yours was taken, and immediately people usually discover it and find the person, right? The fact that they put the list in their pocket to continue to walk around the store so that the owner of that, or not the owner, the person who is using that card and the owner of that list doesn't know that they've discovered it.
Right.
That is where I'm just so fascinated. Like, I want the movie of this.
It's that way that you just want to like know what somebody else's life is like. It's like
Yeah.
that little flower doodled in the corner that's not a curse
Yeah.
or a prayer. It's just
Yeah.
there. It's that I'm that person that walks down the street and looks in other people's windows. So yes, I am that person because I'm in New York. Your window's right on the street. So I want to see that little like slice of what your life is right there.
Oh, I'm with you, and I'm laughing so hard because I thought you were going to say I walk down the street and look in other people's trash cans because that's what I do.
No, I don't do that.
I can't help it. I do. I'm like, oh, there's a lot of beer and apple juice going on in 211. What are they up to? Whipped cream cans.
I had
No, now everybody knows to keep their windows closed when I walk by.
Anecdotally, when I had hurt my ankle, I had ordered groceries in, and one time my Uber Eats person brought me like 2 or 3 bags full of someone else's food in addition to mine. And then when I contacted them, they didn't respond, so I kept them. But they were not, what I think is interesting about this poem is like these groceries feel like very like tender and loving. Like these are things like you want in your body, whereas like in my experience, like they were like all like highly processed, like this, like, Eggo waffle, like all this stuff. It's such a different experience in some ways. Like, I really like this poem, but it feels very romanticized for me at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like the finding the list is more than not being able to read the handwriting on it. It's almost like the speaker is trying to suss out the intention behind the ingredients, like what what are they going to make and why? And they seem to be kind of celebratory elements, like the cranberries with pecans and butternut squash. I mean, those are like not necessarily things you would have on an everyday grocery list, right? So that's kind of interesting, and it brings me back to the first poem with the language of touch. This is more kind of food as a love language, right? Which Sam, you were saying touch is almost always represented in a romantic sense, and it's interesting to see food stand in for a higher meaning as well here.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
It's like the idea that the plants can talk to us.
Wait, what do you mean?
Well, so do I say this now? I don't know. Okay, I'm gonna say it. So I've been going back and I've been rewatching like Northern Exposure episodes, which I suggest everyone do because it's like really interesting. But they've got this one episode where the trees are talking, and of course the New York doctors, the rationalist says, no, the trees can't talk. What are you talking about? They're like, but everybody else sort of understands that the trees can talk to you. Yeah, I just think it's about the ways that food can talk to us. And then the other thing that I want to kind of add on to here, and I understand the romanticism of it, like I get what you're saying there, but there's also something in Jin's voice or the speaker that is on the page in both this poem and the last poem that is really incantatory to me, right? Like kind of like brings me in, like I'll follow this voice. I'll go with you where you want to take me because you've kind of swept me into your voice, and I'm just kind of like in that space where, okay, where's this voice gonna take me? You know, so it's almost like what am I trying to say? There's all these voices around us, and she seems to be kind of like bringing them together and encanting them. And to me, it's just a really beautiful experience. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Well said. An incantation might actually make its way into the title of the episode. Thank you very much. Right. Okay, so you've persuaded me, and yet, Holly, I still come back to the funkiness of eating the list. She doesn't eat the food, right? She eats the list, right? So it's like that seems to really productively work against this sort of overly romantic sense of food, but it also reinforces a kind of romanticizing of the language, like romanticizing of the list, right? Like this sort of deep need that the person whose list she stole, right, is like a deep and soulful other, right, who's somehow feeding the speaker. So like it's just all contradictory in funky ways.
But you know what? That speaks to my read on this is it's not about actual food at all. It's just about having someone to shop for or cook for or eat with. I think it's much more about that. Like from the end of the first stanza, not a curse or a prayer, a devotion.
Right.
Not a singular language to nourish and be nourished. So that sharing, right? And then we roll all the way down to the end, and I found that line, you chew it slowly, it being the list, right? You chew it slowly, the only piece of food to be found. So she eats the list because that's about companionship. That's about the opposite of loneliness. That's, it's about that list is for her exemplified love between two other people. And, and it's the only piece of sustenance to be found.
Oh, I like that reading, Kathy.
I think that's exactly right, Kathy, because all of these food items, this is not food you would make for yourself to eat by yourself, right? And it's almost like this longing of seeing this list and trying to determine what the ciphers are and to translate it into the physical world And how do you do that? I think that's the funkiness, right? Is that you take the cipher into your body, right? That's one way you can make it real for yourself.
Slushies, when we go silent like that, give it a minute before you check your phone. It's probably us just thinking. You could play Jeopardy music in the background. But I guess somebody would have to be on that button, hitting it on. I think we're ready to vote. For me, often that sound of silence means we're ready. So let's shoot thumbs. 1, 2, 3, go. Oh, wait, my brain. Okay, yes, it's in. Call back to the opening of the episode. I suck at math. Apparently, I can't even count. All right. Thank you, Jen. 2 out of 2, and we're up to number 3, the sum of 1. Oh, that's so funny. It's filled with math. Can I read it?
Yes, I think you have to. You totally conjured it.
I totally have to. That's insane. Okay, the sum of 1. 1/3 parent plus 1/3 employee plus 1/3 spouse does not equal one whole you, but permutations of you. Only one can execute its function at any given time. Requirements call for 1.5 parent, you plus 1.5 work, you plus 1.5 spouse, you equals invalid calculation. Insufficient source. Multiply by a factor of school concert times illness times hosting holiday equals exponentially negative integer u. Divide this number by the number of your children given age as a factor of x. Write a proof that demonstrates 1u minus job plus bills equals increase insanity, or 1/3 parent u minus cleaning toilets minus cooking equals increase in you. You are the product of division. U divided by x equals disappearing u, reduced to null, an imaginary unit, when all you want is to be prime, divisible by only 1 and yourself. But 0, 2 can be divided by any number and still remain the same.
Quick and witty and so different from the others, and yet Holly, you said incantatory, and there it is, right? Even in the sort of mathematical equation being hypothesized across the page, there's a sense of like desire and desperation.
I think what so many people feel, like the ways that, and all right, so I have a really silly question. If you divide by 0, you get 0, right?
Right. It remains the same.
Right. Yeah.
So I like that at the end because it throws something in there, right?
Right.
All these things that detract from you are also the things that make you, because if you divide by 0, then you get 0.
I think this is a really dark poem, right? I feel like I'm reading it like Ernest Becker or something. Like all of these other things are the denial of death, and you're 0 at the end, no matter how many of these things you add to your kind of portfolio of interpersonal relationships or accomplishments, etc. I think for me, this is the darkest one of the lot.
And I think we can all relate to this notion of being stretched so thin that you're doing everything and nothing well. It's just I think many people could relate to this sense of this poem here. Like, what if I take out the cleaning toilets? You know, will that improve things?
So I have a question. She's really, really precise with her punctuation. And there's no period at the end of this poem.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is it intentional or
It's
why?
not
Or
being intentional. So,
Yeah.
and I'm thinking about what Sam said about like you're the null at the end or you're the nothing at the end. And it's like, and then that's what kind of continues on. There's nothing to stop it. There's no period there. That's
Yeah,
the eternity of it.
right. That's what I saw, Holly, is that like repeating number at the end of the line. You know what I mean? 6666666 ad infinitum, or I guess 00000, right? Yeah, I thought that was really smart. Should just not put a period on the end and have it stay open.
Yeah, because it's definitely not a mistake. It's not something she just left out.
Yeah,
She's
right.
really precise with her punctuation.
Okay, nobody has said anything negative about any of these, so here I go, just for a little tension on the episode. Do we get it and it goes on too long? Is she just doing the same thing line after line after line? Everybody already knows this in many ways, right? Like, oh, the hard life of the parent and the working, like it. I realize she's doing something different to say the same thing, though.
Yeah. So that comes back, like that's what sort of pulls me back to Flavor in the Hands, the first poem we looked at, right? Which again feels like it's working by accumulation, right? And this one's working by accumulation, right? So it's sort of like restating it in like sort of witty and innovative ways, like sort of reworking this equation and still finding ultimately the answer is 0, right? The answer is that, as Sam said, a kind of darkness at the end of that tunnel, right? So I don't know, Kath, I think that is part of maybe both the a poetic style, but also a potential problem, right, with the repetition, right? Is it enough of a surprise to keep you coming back? And that's Slushies, by the way. I'm basically quoting Kathy back to Kathy. This is one of Kathy's sort of like aesthetics, right? That if a poem makes you stay with it, if a poem surprises you, if a poem gives you a new way of thinking about something, then you're paying attention. But if it's just restating something that's pretty commonplace and then not making you stay with it, then that's not your delight.
I could see a version of this poem that was more intentionally written as a word problem, like the ones that used to give me cold sweats in math class. The train is traveling at 55 miles an hour going west, and the cat is in the box, and is the cat alive by the time you reach Omaha? I think that could be really fascinating for this poem. And I would love to see a version of it like that.
Yeah. I wonder too, just what the poem would look like if the numbers were spelled out. And I'll say that this is something personal, but I just don't like looking at numbers. But I'll look at the word too, and I'll think about it. I'm like, that word has symmetry. Like that's a beautiful word.
That's such a poet thing to say. You're so not an engineer. You're such a poet.
You guys, I stumbled on the word integer. I was like, oh, that's a math term, I think. Right? I was like, it's so unfamiliar to me. I was like,
But I think, and I don't know if it's the font in in this poem, but in a couple places where it's one, like in the second line, does not equal one whole U. I read that as I at first.
Yeah.
So I think they'd have to have a more serify font.
So at least I have to say, I kind of like the confusion of that, right? Like I do the right, like we could definitely do that with a fix it with the font, but the one, the whole, and the U, those three words together are lovely, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. I have to say, as reading it though and wanting to get it right, I almost said I a couple times. And I was like, oh, nope, that isn't one. You know.
That's funny. That's actually fucking
Yeah.
funny. That's the poem, right? Like the wholeness of the subjectivity, the wholeness of the I, right? And the impossible receding possibility of that.
I'm going to go back to, because, when I first read these silently, I had some, some similar thoughts about it. But one of the things I was thinking, even before we came on here, and now even more as we're reading them out loud, is that this poet really holds me in her hands and and guides me, and I really appreciate the skill with which it's all done and the intentionality with which it's all done. So I really, really appreciate the level of difficulty of these poems.
So the score changes, right? Difficulty level. It's just like ice skating. I always knew it. Poetry is just like ice skating. Are we ready to vote?
I think so.
Boy, did I do an upspeak on that one. All right. Okay, let's do it. 1, 2, 3, vote. Okay, this one's not going to go in, but we're so happy that we have the two poems here. We have the flavor is in the hands, and that time you stole someone's shopping cart. Thank you so much, Jin Cordaro. Thank you. We are honored to have discussed your work and to publish it. And anybody have anything else they want to say?
Have fun in Taiwan, Sam. We'll miss you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll see you all in the end of August.
Yay.
Yeah.
Thank you all. This has been so much fun. Like I could spend an hour talking about beautiful poems with smart women. I love that.
Funny, that's what I wanted to chime in with too, which is to say again, thank you to Jin, and the delight of being able to talk about Jin's work with you all has been extraordinary. So thank you.
Yeah.
Really good.
What a great day. All right, Slushies, you keep reading and you have a great day too. Thank you so much. Woohoo!